It out. Okay, so here we go. We'll just be a second with this, setting us up. Oh, there you are. Okay, I think we're in. So everyone, we're just doing the old technology check, although I'm not there, it seems. So just a second. Okay, we're there. Okay, I'm gonna shut that. And so I can see you again. Okay, good morning, everyone. This is the Wednesday Craft and Conversation in the Write Your Story Society Facebook group, and I'm Tracy, and I'm here with my special guest, Meheruna Ghani, and Meheruna and I were in the Women's Studies program at UVic a long time ago.
Yes.
And what's really cool, I think we saw each other once. Meheruna was up in the Comox Valley and dropped in on one of my yoga classes at the Kingfisher Spa, and then showed up in the Facebook group in when was it, in February or March when we did the challenge, and such a delight to reconnect with her and find out what she's been working on. Okay, it's sort of a mouthful, so you'll have to help me. An autobiographical memoir that's a piece of creative hybrid. What did you say?
Hybrid creative nonfiction.
Right, which I'm really excited to talk about, and it's called Letters to Rumi, and I'm really wanting Meheruna to share with us the how she came to this particular project, what the project is, and how she came to it, and to elaborate on writing as a spiritual journey, which I think for some of us anyway, it's very much linked to our writing is very much an expression of our spiritual being. So welcome, Meheruna. So glad to have you here.
Thank you. It's so exciting to be here. And I don't know if you remember when we first realized, when I realized, oh, I know you from the past, I said, there's no coincidences in life.
So true.
At least that's what I believe. So it's been, thank you for inviting me to share here today.
Well, it's such a pleasure. And I really want to dig into your project. And also, just before we got on here, I noticed Meheruna had a board in, which you can see behind her there in the background, and she brought it closer. So she's going to share a bit about that because it is connected with her book. So Meheruna, tell us a little bit about the kind of impetus to write this autobiographical memoir, when that came about, and how the form has developed and changed as you've been going through it. And and I won't layer on the questions, but I'll ask you more as we go along.
Sure. Well, there's moments of loss and grief that we all go through and will go through at various times in our lives. So I will say backtrack to 2011, 2012. And that's when a significant change happened in my life, where I was once working for the BC provincial government, and my 20-year career ended abruptly. And so I went through some loss, and basically I pulled out trying to find who could I talk to, who could I write to, a counselor or somebody who was like me. And I decided to research and find Dear Abby. And as I found Dear Abby, I drafted a letter, and then I also searched, well, who is behind Dear Abby? And found Ann Landers. And as I was writing, my intersectionality, my intersectional identity and angst around fighting racism, sexism, all of these areas, and also connecting spiritually with folks, I kind of thought, wait, I don't think Dear Abby's going to get me. And so I researched on, of all places, Facebook, and said there must be something. And I discovered a Facebook page on called Rumi, and it was administered by Rumi from Konya. And I thought, what if? And I started to follow, and I'd get quotes every morning, and it seemed like quotes that I resonated with.
Mhm.
And I started to take those quotes and post them on my own Facebook page. And I started to write letters, Dear Rumi, to
Ah,
respond to those quotes. And that evolved. I got a following of people, and it turned into letters to Rumi. And from there, it moved forward. Yeah.
cool. So I'm curious, when you said you set out to write letters like to Dear Abby or whatever,
Yeah.
were you looking just, not just, but to write letters that, like, were you kind of looking for advice or looking for yeah, what were you looking for
I
in
was
the
looking
in
for
that writing?
advice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was lost, and I was like, can't somebody help me?
Right. And so in the writing, or in beginning to write these letters to Rumi, um, in an effort to seek help, essentially, what have you discovered?
I've discovered a lot of strength and help within myself.
Beautiful.
And I've also discovered that there are lots of people around me who are going through similar journeys. So when I would share those little, there were little posts of my response, letters to Rumi, I couldn't believe the number of people who would write back saying they felt like I was speaking to them.
Mm.
And through that process, I realized there's a lot of people out there in the world who are just trying to find a way to connect and to find themselves through their journeys, through
Right.
whatever aspects they go through. And writing, through that process of writing, is a powerful mechanism to do that.
Yes. Yes.
And I would like to just add, like, in finding that Facebook page, it also reminded me of when I was 23 at UVic, and I had a heartbreak, and I went
Mhm.
searching back then to the library, and I couldn't find, I was looking for South Asian Canadian born women counselors and or poets,
Mhm.
South Asian Canadian poets. And there was nothing like
Mm.
that back then in the library.
Right.
So then I took off to Monroe's, and I discovered the poetry section, and there I found Rumi. And I didn't know who Rumi was. And I opened up the book and thought, oh my goodness, there's all this stuff about love, grief, and loss
Mhm.
that connected with me. And so I parked, that's where I first was introduced to Rumi, was back in my 20s, and then got remembered, reintroduced when I was in my 40s.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, was what the translation was that you came across at Monroe's, because that's something we talked about a little bit
Yeah.
before, was the translations, and there are many, and the very popular one is the Coleman Barks
Yeah. Yeah. So
translation.
yeah, definitely it was the it's the Essential Guide to Rumi. I'm just looking over at my bookshelf. The
Yeah, I do
Essential
that a
Guide,
lot.
yeah, The Essential Guide to Rumi by Coleman Barks, for sure. And and you and again, it was I didn't find any books written by translations written by people of color, Persian speaking
Mhm.
authors at that time. So we're talking about 1993-ish, I would say.
Yeah.
um, so yeah, and so for me, it was like when I opened up the book, I then looked at the author's note and I was like, yeah, well, he's a white dude. But he contextualized, and I thought with some of his context, there was references to a
Mhm.
part of the world and to who Rumi was. He's a 13th century um, poet, Muslim poet. And there was references, even though he didn't name exactly Rumi's background, because on paper, Rumi is an imam, a
Mhm.
Sufi mystic, Muslim theologian who was very well versed in the Quran. So all of that
Right.
at that time got missed, in
Yeah.
my view. So, however, for me, it was like there, it's the thing that spoke to me at the time.
Yes.
Since then, I would say not until 2018, 2017, I found um, Rumi's work translated by a Persian speaking author.
Mm.
And once I found that, then I was like, okay, here it is finally. And I bought he's only translated Rumi's Masnavi, is critical of Rumi's work.
Okay.
He's translated only 4 volumes of the 6. And Masnavi literally means a couplet. It's a
Oh,
couplet.
okay.
So Rumi's Masnavi is a couplet over 6 volumes that he's written along the Sufi path. Um,
Right.
yeah, so that was the main thing that was critical for me to find that eventually. And
Yes.
it took me that many years
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
find, and I still haven't found Persian speaking women authors yet. I know they're out there. I found a
Right.
few later, again around 2017, 2018. Yeah.
Translating.
Translating, yes,
Yeah.
translating. I should qualify it. Yeah, thanks for
Yeah.
saying that, because there's a difference between translating and interpreting. So Coleman Barks, in his sort of notes, he often says he's interpreting and doing renderings of
Mm.
Rumi's works, and
Yeah.
he's done that of other authors who have said they're translators,
Right.
English speaking
Right.
translators of Rumi's work.
So it's kind of like the removed, like twice removed almost from the Persian.
Yeah, and the problem for me with that is that it does remove. So there's not a problem with the that I have of the renderings or interpretations. It's just making sure that there's recognition and acknowledgement of who exactly Rumi is and was at the time,
Yeah.
and going forward around that, meaning that his being a Muslim, an imam, and well versed in Islam and Quran
Yeah.
doesn't get erased.
Right. Because, as in reading the essential Rumi, which is right there,
Yeah.
as I understand, as I have understood it, or especially early on, was, he was a Sufi poet and kind of an ecstatic poet. Like that's the limited understanding I have had. And I'm seeing a question here for you,
Okay.
Mehruna, from Sharon. She's asking, was there a huge difference in those translations or just the background information shared about the poet?
There's a huge difference.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing I would add is the thing that really, so Betsy Warland was my mentor around through the Vancouver Manuscript Intensive. It would have been around, I think it was 2014, 2016, around that time. She was one of the first people at that time. She came to my place in Vancouver when I was living there, and she asked if she could see my Quran. And I showed it to her and she took a photo and she said, when are you going to read? Have you read it? And I was like, no. And she's like, when are you going to read it? And so I said, I will one day. And the reason, so that's a part of my writing journey is I was looking for a woman, Muslim woman scholar who has translated the Quran, because I don't speak Arabic. I don't speak classical Arabic, so I needed English. And I haven't found, I didn't find it at the time. So I've now, being the current artist in residence at the University of Victoria and in delving more deeply into the letters to Rumi, I've read the one version of the English one version of the English translation of the Quran alongside the translation of the Masnavi. Now Rumi makes sense.
Oh, beautiful.
Yes.
And can you give like, I mean, I can imagine that I can imagine that's true, and I'm curious how that's true.
In terms of how he makes sense?
To you, yeah.
Okay,
And like maybe you could use a specific just image or example or something that that like, you know, those moments when you know, perhaps as you're reading, there was a moment that was like, oh, or was it sort of a general, oh?
I'm just writing it down so I don't forget. Yeah, there's a lot of references in the various interpretation and renderings to certain parables. And when, let me just pull one of the books here. So Rumi's the Masnavi, and I don't know if people will be able to see this clearly, but this is book one that's been translated by Javed Mojaddadi. So in these volumes, there's references. Rumi has used lyrical prose and poetry and folklore of the time, and animals come up a lot, telling stories about through animals, and the kings and the various leaders, and also parables that connect back to the Quran. And so Javed Mojaddadi has referenced, footnoted which passages are connection back to the Quran.
Okay.
So when you then go back and read the Quran, then what Rumi's trying to express in terms of a learning or a lesson, it becomes more clear. Right. However, I have to also say that the Masnavi, it is very complex. So that's the difference between this and the interpretations, because the interpretations are others' sort of sense of what resonates for them and their own sort of way of expressing whatever they need to express. They meaning these other interpreters and writers. And that's fine for their own work, just like it may be fine for me and my own work. However, for the importance, I think for me, if I'm using interpretations and renderings, is to ensure there's still this authenticity of what I'm communicating that links back to who I am as a Muslim writer, and back to the connection that I have with, say, the Quran. Even though I'm not well versed in the Quran, and I don't call myself and I'm not an imam, I'm not a scholar of Islam, but there is a resonance for me. So an example of a parable that's often referenced in some of the renderings and interpretations, and even with this translation, is the story is connected back to Moses, actually. And so there's this one beautiful parable, that is in one of the interpretations that I have, and I found it in the Quran. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is a story. And it's to do with Moses and this sage named Khidr. And Khidr is spelled Khidr, which is loosely translated as green.
Mm,
But really, it's not really about the color. There's a whole meaning and metaphor around green.
right.
However, Gither was known as a sage that was connected to God.
Mhm.
And Moses wanted to follow him. And Moses said, please teach me what you know. And Gither says, if you're going to come with me, you cannot ask any question of what I do.
Right.
And in that journey, Moses kept asking questions and
Yeah, of course.
things that that Gidder was doing. And in the end, Gidder said, in the last moment, Gidder said, "That's it. That I'm cutting you away. You can't stop asking questions." And by then, Gidder then told Moses why he did what he did. And so the moral of that parable is about you when you see things, often people judge without knowing the story
Mhm.
behind whatever they see. So it's about patience and it's about not passing judgment. And
Right.
so that parable is used in many, or referenced, I would say, in many um, interpretations. So that's the power to going back
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
the authentic translations or the source. Really, the source for Rumi is the Quran.
So now I'm going to ask you how that has affected your work, because you have sort of, you've really gone deeper, it sounds like, into the Rumi, into your reading of Rumi and your reading of the Quran, as you're also working on letters to Rumi. So I'm curious how that's changed your writing, how that's changed not necessarily the style of your writing, but the content and the questions and the even the answers that you've come to through that process.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think for me, see, I started Letters to Rumi back in 2012, and so
Mhm.
that's a long journey.
Yeah.
And what it's making me do now in going back, I have a huge binder of writing, and it's going back and seeing, does it stand true for me now, those
Mhm.
drafts I've written, and how have they evolved or are going to evolve. And I I have to be honest too, like I'm really thinking about, like I'm oh, what's the word I want to use, there's a bit of lack of confidence right now and insecurity of like, who the hell do I think I am? And I'm using the word hell, and here I'm talking about religion. so, so forgive me. But I'm going through these moments of, oh my goodness, what am I doing?
Yeah.
um, because there's this source that is very integral to who Rumi was, and I don't want to um, lose that, and I want to make sure the authenticity is there, while at the same time going through my own search of whether I want to say spiritual search or whatever journey.
Mhm.
I'm trying not to categorize myself so much, because I
Yeah.
think the human search is not always categorized, can be categorized. So I'm on some kind of search. I'm a seeker. Let's say I'm a seeker.
Yeah.
I do say that.
Yeah.
I'm a seeker. And in that seeking, what I wrote, in back in 2012, like what's it been, 8, 9 years now? That seeking would have been different to the seeking I'm at right now. So I need to go back and look at all those drafts and see, okay, what stands and what's changed and perhaps maybe even writing in what I'm even talking to you.
That's, yeah, that's what I was just gonna say, is that part of it too, right? Where we, especially as a seeker in memoir, I think there's the space for that, right?
Mhm.
That kind of ability to question and acknowledge that the journey that you've been on in the writing itself.
Yeah. And just this
Yeah.
morning, I've been reading a few articles. There's been a lot of talk in various platforms and festivals around, as creative nonfiction writers, what is truth and what is fact?
Hmm. Hmm.
And I'm thinking a lot around that sort of question, and in terms of going back in looking at all my writing, like, who is the poetic I, the capital I, and what is the poetic truthfulness of what I'm writing? What does it mean to write truthfully and authentically about my life, while at the same time remaining authentic to the vehicle? The vehicle I'm using is Rumi.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm seeing a question.
Sure.
Sharon is saying truth and fact are different. So maybe you could speak to that. What I think I understand what you mean, but maybe you could elaborate on that a little bit.
Well, it's also stuff I'm learning at this moment, because I'm trying to see is there a difference? And
Hmm.
in terms of one of so the Malahat, what's the Malahat Review is, they did a whole panel on this. And
Oh,
so I was
cool.
just reading. So truth to me is, I have my personal truth of what I've experienced and what I've gone through in terms of my own journey in life. Fact would be the things like factually what's been reported and written about, say, who Rumi is, that he is a Muslim, he is a Sufi, he is an Imam, he is a scholar of Islam and the Quran. Those are facts that history books and various writings have recorded. Now, a you know, in creative writing, perhaps somebody might stretch that a little bit, saying, well, I met Rumi. Like, so for me, the fact that
Yeah.
I'm writing letters to Rumi, I'm writing Dear Rumi as though he's alive.
Yes.
And in my mind, I'm saying maybe he is.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
others might say, well, actually, factually, he's dead.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
But my creative mind, my mind that like I think I've said to you before, Tracy, I believe in unicorns. So somebody like me who believes in unicorns and fairies and mysticism and
Yeah.
all, the Loch Ness monster, believes that Rumi is alive.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's great.
what's going to happen? I don't know.
It's sort of a wonderful, I'm going to call it a predicament, to grapple with these questions, right? Because it's really, that's what's interesting, is the grappling, right? If we had a clear answer, maybe not so interesting, but what happens for you as you go into the questioning in terms of um yeah, in terms of connecting with that higher part of yourself, or whatever you want to call it. I just think that that's, you know, maybe what those questions are really pointing to.
Mhm. Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't
What do you
know.
think?
Um, I often, well, yeah, I, I like to believe in magical and, like, this sort of magical world, even though there's facts that will tell me, okay, there are no fairies, or I'm having a hard time saying that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um, because I think I like the creative space that I'm in, because that is the it's the imagination, it's the imagining, it's the wonder. And from that wonder and that imagination is where I pull from and write. And yes, there will be moments, and there are moments that I am going through and seeing, okay, just what exactly am I writing and saying, and being true to who I am and what I want to say.
Yes.
Rumi, yes, Rumi was my vehicle. Rumi is my vehicle because it's the place I connect to. And like I said at the beginning, the thing I was searching for to help me write, and it did, and it has been doing that for me. I often get asked, who is Rumi? And who is Rumi for me? Who is Rumi in Letters to Rumi? And I often say, okay, on paper, I've described who Rumi is on paper, we've got his description. But for me, in terms of Letters to Rumi, Rumi becomes a metaphor. Rumi can be whoever you want Rumi to be. And I cannot describe Rumi to people, but for me, Rumi is a metaphor of, might be a man or a woman, might be a friend, might be a counselor, might be a fairy, might be something spiritual, might be my lover, might be somebody else, might be a spirit or a soul, could be anything. So that's how I describe it. And some people might not like that, and that's okay. But that's what Rumi is for me in this writing process.
Well, so let's talk about the form itself. And I love how you came to it with that kind of seeking and that writing letters for advice, essentially, and finding that strength and that help within yourself. But you're calling this a creative nonfiction hybrid, and I would love for you to kind of elaborate on what that means for you. It's obviously, hybrid is a word that can invite different forms into the memoir. So it's not a standard issue memoir, if there is such a thing.
Yeah.
So maybe you could tell us about that.
Yeah, I had a real issue with saying the word memoir. But then this goes back to my SFU writer studio days. And I loved going through that process. And at one point we had to, sort of categorize, come up with what the book would be known as. And I was like, memoir to me sounded so limiting. And when I came across years later this word hybrid creative nonfiction, and it was through Shalene Knight's her dear current occupant. She describes as hybrid creative nonfiction. I was like, yes, that totally spoke to me, because to me, so creative hybrid nonfiction it's like a gathering of various styles of writing. So Letters to Rumi is lyrical prose and poetry. So there is a narrative. There's the letter format, which is also known as epistolary genre. But epistolary genre usually is fiction. However, mine is nonfiction. And within that letter process is the epigraph of a Rumi quote. And I am responding to that quote through the letter. Okay. And in some cases, at the end of the letter, I write a poem back to that quote, that epigraph. Right. And where that comes from is from my own heritage ancestry, is within the South Asian world, is the ghazal format, or it's also this tradition called qawwali. Mushair is like a circle of poets and gatherings. And what would happen with ghazal and qawwali is the most famous qawwali person would be Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, the singer, who's passed away long ago. So often in these traditions, there's somebody who says something in a poetic form, and someone else responds back in a poetic form. And in some situations, it's, let's say, okay, in the Western sense, it's slam poetry competition. Somebody ups the other with a verse back.
Right.
But in the musical format of ghazal or qawwali, it's a call and response that not necessarily in a competition, but is sometimes. So for me to respond back to Rumi is that.
Mm.
And so this is I had said at the Growing Room Festival a couple years ago when I was talking about my work there, that really, you know, underlying all of this is I'm just waiting for, there's me who's wanting to fall in love, and I'm waiting for the guy who's going to respond back to me in a poem. That's basically what I'm looking for. And I haven't found that. So
you're creating it.
Yeah, so I haven't found somebody who's responding back to me.
Yeah.
Maybe when I'm done and published. But what was so sweet at the Growing Room Festival, this young person wrote a poem back to me and handed it to me, and I just loved that so much.
Oh, that's lovely.
And the other thing with this hybrid notion, I love this idea, this word of hybrid creative nonfiction, because I'm bringing in many tools, modes of writing into it. Poetry, narrative, prose. And to me, being a person of, I say, intersectional identities and hybridity, doesn't it make sense to have a hybridity of writing that represents a hybridity of identities? That is the power for me in this terminology of hybridity, creative nonfiction.
I love it. Yeah, beautiful. So, yeah, it kind of gave me shivers. I just love that when we find form that is reflective and symbolic of more than just the work itself, you know, it's really beautiful. And I also I'm kind of, as you were speaking about the call and response type, I was just like, oh, that sounds like so good, you know, it would be such a beautiful gathering, a beautiful circle to be a part of. Maybe we should recreate that.
Yeah, totally.
After COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah. So before we finish up, I'd love for you to speak to that board that is behind you as part of your process. I know you mentioned your binder. And I imagine, because you've been writing or working on this project since 2012, that you have a lot of content. And this is something that some of my students grapple with too, lots of content, figuring out how to sort it out. And so I feel like you've got a really visual and perhaps helpful way to do it by the board. So if you want to.
Okay, here's my binder.
Oh my gosh, Mehrun, I was not expecting it to be that thick, holy moly.
And that's not even everything printed out yet. And yes, so that's all the stuff that's all draft. And, you know, it's stuff that I consider crap that I think is not the best. And, you know, we all say as writers, your first writings, drafts it's totally true. When you do it, you write it and you burn it and you feel, okay, yeah, that was no good. So I am in that place. However, I'm not in the stage of burning any of it, because I also believe you can always reuse it in some way.
Yeah.
So coming to the board, while in being the artist in residence at the University of Victoria, I had one of the to-dos I had as a deadline that I self-imposed was, I'm going to have an outline that's clear. And so um, after 8 years of writing, I once I started reading the Masnavi, the translation, and the Quran, I had this aha moment, and um, of something that came to me in terms of an outline. And in my professional life, when I right now I'm just focused on writing, so I'm not really doing any of my professional life. But as a community engagement and diversity inclusion specialist, I would do major projects, and I would create something called a mind map. So it's just a tool, a technique to sort of um, outline what it is you have in mind in terms of your project. So I decided, what if I applied that same technique to a book? And so I call this visual, and I'm a visual person. I need to see things visually, like draw it out. I call it my book mind map. And what I've created is, by doing this, I have themes. And back in 2016, I used my Facebook platform, asking whoever follows me. I asked a question. I said, if you had something you wanted to ask of Rumi, what would that be using one word?
Mhm.
And that's just because I didn't want to read through essays from people.
Sure, fair.
So one word. And people gave me words. So that was back in 2016. So I thought, oh my goodness, what if I took those words and plotted them out through the themes I've discovered through the Masnavi? So basically, the Masnavi is the overarching theme on a very general level is a Sufi path. And what the Sufi path is around the self. In terms of Sufism, it's about annihilating the self and going through reason and knowledge, and eventually understanding the divine existence, moving towards the divine. And so I thought, oh, what if I took that and applied that? Because that's basically what I was doing through my own autobiography. Is it's focused on myself as a theme, my internal self, my healing self, then reason and knowledge in terms of diversity and inclusion, and then and understanding divine existence. That's where the spiritual side comes in. Now, underneath these three themes are mapped out those words that were given to me in 2016. I said, let me see if those words fit, and they do. So under the first theme of self, the words that came to me by the various friends and followers were ego, understanding ego of yourself, um, sadness, grief, loss, anger, contradiction, fear, overcoming fear, forgiveness, catharsis, release, redemption. That's all I fit into self. Then reason and knowledge is things like the why, purpose. I put it, somebody said green, which I'm associating to the story of Gidar.
Yeah.
Intimacy, a Jedi is my reference to justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Being found, belong, sensuality, hope, belief, faith, humor, happiness. Then the last of understanding divine existence has to do with sacredness, soul, peace, inner peace, being, love, beloved, warmth, joy, flow, found. Now, the why I didn't make any of this permanent is that they can shift. It all shifts under these themes. Now, my container of my book, and that too came to me through my revelation of my residency, and I can share the link to my public talk of the residency, because that describes, in there I do a reading of what I've created and I don't know yet, it's like a prologue or introduction of the book, which describes the container. The container of my book is a trunk. Now,
Okay, I was wondering why it said
yeah,
trunk
it says
down
trunk
there.
on the bottom. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so the trunk is a family trunk that we have that when my father and mother got married, my mother was in East Africa, and all of her belongings were put into this handmade galvanized steel trunk that was handmade in 1967 and shipped to Canada. So this trunk is a very interesting. These types of trunks, many migrants of the time would come over with trunks on the
Mhm.
ship
Mhm.
to wherever they were going. So, and as my father passed away in 2019, and my family's stories, my mother, they are part of my stories and
Yeah.
part of Letters to Rumi. So that's part of my loss. And so in that process, we were decluttering the trunk. And suddenly it occurred to me, these are the stories, and that trunk has become the container of my book. And through that trunk, the stories are being released. And I've written here, the trunk is the container, the stories are being released, and the questions, and Rumi is helping me weave it.
Beautiful. And so now you have that visual, and have you worked with it to begin to put the shape, put the book into shape, and how's that going?
Yes. So what I did was I then took these themes and I took that binder that I showed you of all the pieces of writing, and I said, where do these pieces of writing fit?
Yes.
And I know there are, other writer mentors out there, and the teachers will say, just write, just free flow write, and not to structure. But I can't operate that way right now. Like, I have so much material that I somehow need a structure to help me.
Yes. Yes.
And so,
Yeah.
sorry.
I just
So
really believe in structure, actually.
yeah, I'm having
Yeah.
a hard time with free flow, and I'm trying really hard. So anyways, I put those titles under these and I see a fit. However, I have not touched those titles yet to rewrite. What I have done is I've placed them right now. And what I did do, and this is going back to uh, some of the techniques that I've learned through Anne Lamont's Bird by Bird
Mhm.
book, and also through the program that you did,
Yeah, the 5-day challenge,
five-day
the story
challenge.
clarity. Yeah.
Yeah, that, and through Shalene Knight's Learn Writing Essentials,
Mhm.
um, is I wrote a skeleton.
Mhm.
So what I mean by skeleton, as I was releasing from the trunk, I jotted in a skeletal way an outline, like literally with nothing
Kind of
substantial.
like these are the facts kind of thing.
Kinda, yeah, yeah. Like,
Yeah.
there's nothing substantial, but these are the things I know I want to write
Yeah.
about
Yes.
as the trunk's releasing. And now what I'm doing is fleshing that out, adding flesh to the skeleton, basically.
Mhm.
And what I'm seeing is what could be brought forward from the binder that might fit into that skeleton, and
Yeah.
what needs to just be parked aside. So, for example, um, when I describe sort of this introduction prologue, is what it is situating the when my father was dying, and
Mhm.
the burial, the Muslim burial, and how that goes. And that is juxtapositioned with the trunk.
Right.
So describing the burial, the coffin,
Yeah.
and that coffin alongside juxtapositioning in the writing, the trunk is very, I don't
They,
know.
they kind of chime off each other in a
Yes.
way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I don't know what kind of word to use other than, it's like, I don't know, like a metaphor or just, I don't know.
I call it an
It's
echo,
powerful.
like it's sort of a
Ah,
symbolic echo or something like that.
oh, I love that. And why that's so important is because when in terms of a Muslim being buried, is not in a coffin. So the way the process here, at least, was we put the body is in the coffin so we can pay respect. However, in the burial, the body is removed from the coffin, and before that, the body is washed and in a ceremonial way, and a shroud is put around the body, and there's a tie that is just above the feet, like around the ankles, a tie in the middle of the body, and a tie above the head. Now, the
Right.
trunk, I asked my mom, why are there these bands around this trunk? Is that decorative? And she's like, it's because that's what holds the trunk together. The
Oh,
trunk has a band on either end and a band in the middle. And
mm,
it's a type of, I guess, a steel of some sort. So that description in
yeah.
itself just was, mm, it was like my aha.
Yes.
So when that, and in that writing, that became sort of the end line of that piece of writing is that there's just my mother, sister, and me. I lift the lid.
Mm,
That's the last line of that piece, meaning I've now lifted the lid of the trunk. And from there, I move forward with all these pieces of writing. And so a new piece that I've been working on right now that's a part of this collection is my dad's story and experience of the 1947 partition
right.
of India.
Yeah.
And that piece is going to go along with in this whole collection in the skeleton. And the skeleton would be like the piece of a skeleton. So I'm just guessing right now, so I don't know
The
exactly.
bones. Yeah.
So with the story of partition, there was a lot of violence and various forms of discrimination, and just in terms of colonialism, there was racism. However, the story of my dad's story is the survival that they go through, and what he saw was communal violence. Because
Mm,
I asked him things like, "Didn't you see racism? Didn't you see?" And he's like, "No, he didn't see that. He saw communal violence, people killing each other in the name of
yeah.
their religion or whatever." And so for me, that is integral in terms of the writing I'm doing in the theme of reason and knowledge
Mhm.
of who it is I am as a person who's been fighting um, various
Right.
forms of inequity. When I said to you, one of the words that
Jedi.
I've got, Jedi, justice,
Yeah.
equity, diversity, inclusion. So in order for me as a person who, that's the reason for me who's fighting like forms of inequities, is because I've been informed
Yes.
by my father's struggle and fight of survival during inequity of what happened as a result of partition.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's big. This
It's
whole,
really big. I know. I was just thinking that when you said that. I
yeah,
was like, wow. Okay, so I before we go, I just want to read some of the comments that we have been
sure.
getting. Anne is saying, love the hybrid, makes sense of my struggle with memoir. I also feel awkward about that word. Thanks for defining it. Anthea is glad I asked you about the board and the bucket or the categories. And Sharon is saying nonfiction especially needs structure, but without the right structure, fiction won't stand up either. It's fine to write without it, but you have to realize you'll have to make sure the structure is there before a book is ready for public consumption, and that you need something to organize it. And you know that. I mean, you've got your binder. And in one way, I mean, I think we have just Oh, yes, we're getting on in time, but and I've got another call in a minute, but
Okay.
um I just wanted to say, like, in one way, you had a form all along, the Dear Rumi part, right?
Yeah.
And so that in a way is also an organizing structure, just so
Yes.
people aren't like, you haven't been without any structure,
Yes.
but now it's how to take the smaller structures and put them into a bigger structure.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the challenge.
It's a
So
challenge.
So I want to thank you so much, Meharuna, for taking the time and sharing, yeah, all about your process and this journey. And it's so lovely to see you and have conversation with you again. And I love seeing your board. And I hope that we get to see each other soon in live and in
Yes.
person. And
Yes.
you can hang on here for a moment and I'll just stop our streaming. So
Okay.
thank you
Thank
everyone for
you.
tuning in and happy writing.